We found a cave during our hiking trip. We never should have gone inside. Have you ever found something you wish you'd never discovered? Something so strange, so unnatural, that even years later you still question whether it was real or some kind of waking nightmare. That's what happened to me and my best friend, Jake. What was supposed to be just another summer hiking trip turned into the most terrifying experience of my life. One that still haunts me every time I see a mountain, or even just a dark tunnel. And if you're listening to this, let me warn you, what I'm about to tell you is not some campfire story. It's not a made-up ghost tale. Dies apin, and I swear to you, every word is real. Part 1. The discovery: Jake and I had been friends for over a decade. We met during one of my solo hikes years ago, sitting by a lake with coffee that was barely warm. He offered me some. We started talking, and from then on, we stuck together. Every summer we'd set out on long hikes, just the two of us. Somi supplice and the wilderness. This summer was different, though. Quarantine had cut us off from almost everything, and we craved escape. So we planned an extended trip into the mountains near our city, remote, rugged terrain where we could disappear for a week. We packed carefully. Food, emergency phone, camping gear, and a couple of bottles of whiskey for the nights. By the time we hit the trail, the valley was alive with green from the spring rains. The abandoned farms we passed looked almost surreal, fields of tall grass stretching into dense forests, with mountains towering in the distance. I loved that feeling of climbing, of my body straining against the incline, lungs burning but alive. By the time we reached the plateau, the sun was setting, bleeding orange into the horizon. We set up camp, started a fire, and, as usual, traded ghost stories over whiskey. At some point I stumbled away from the camp to relieve myself. That's when I saw it. The cave. It was carved into the cliff face, barely noticeable in the half-dark. The opening wasn't wide, just big enough for an adult to crouch and squeeze through. And yet, something about it, something about that black maw and the rock made my stomach tighten. "Jake," I shouted, my voice echoing against the cliff walls. "You've got to see this." Even drunk, we knew better than to go in right then, but we promised each other come morning we'd explore. Part 2. Entering the darkness the next day, we woke early, surprisingly free of hangovers. Sunlight painted the valley golden, and the cave mouth looked far less menacing in the morning light. Almost inviting. We packed up a flashlight each, a small coil of rope, and chalk to mark our path. Jake went first, crouching with the stronger light, while I followed behind, leaving faint marks on the stone. The entrance narrowed at first, forcing us to crawl, but then it opened into a chamber where we could stand, and that's when we saw them. Bones. Hundreds of them, layered into the walls. Not fresh, not bloody, but embedded in the limestone itself, eroded into strange shapes. Some were long and animal-like, others smaller, almost human. Pale insects skittered in and out of cracks, their bodies translucent under our flashlights. "What the hell?" Jake whispered. I leaned closer. The bugs had no eyes, no pigment, their legs bent at odd angles, antennae twitching as if they felt our presence. Better leave them. Jake Mothered could be poisonous. Already, the air felt heavier, damp, cold. But curiosity drove us deeper. The chamber gave way to a network of narrow passages. We had to crawl on hands and knees, squeezing through jagged stone that scraped our arms. Moratan, Onse. We hit dead ends, but finally, Jake found a crawl space that opened into something much larger. And when I wriggled out beside him, I froze. It was the biggest cave room I'd ever seen. The ceiling stretched into darkness. Into middle, a gaping pit, dropped 20 feet down to an underground river. Only a narrow stone path wound around it to the far side. "Don't slip," I muttered. Jake, of course, pretended to stumble, laughing when I reached for him. But behind the laughter, I sensed the same thing. I felt something about this place wasn't right. We pressed on. Daga. The deeper we went, the colder it grew. The walls slick with condensation. Hours slipped by, but the cave just kept going. And then The sound started. Part 3. The growl. At first, it was faint, a low, wet growl that seemed to seep from the stone itself. Both of us stopped in our tracks. My chest tightened. "You heard that, right?" Primera whispered. Jake tried to laugh it off, but his voice shook. "Yeah, definitely heard that." We turned back, deciding we'd gone far enough. But the sound followed us closer now, echoing through the tunnels. And then, impossibly, it came from both ahead of us and behind. Something was moving in the dark. We crawled faster, scraping our knees, the beam of my flashlight bouncing wildly. I could hear Jake's breathing quicken, and then he screamed. I scrambled forward, heart slamming against my ribs, until I reached him at the cliffside chamber. He was standing at the edge, shining his flashlight downward, and that's when I saw it. This terrifying tale comes from a certain user. I went spelunking with my best friend Jake last month, in an unnamed state. We're both experienced cavers, so we packed lightly with only our headlamps, a small rope, and some water. The cave we entered was pitch black with icy cold air that bit at our lungs. We began to make our way through the tunnels. At first, it was easy going, the kind of caving we'd done countless times before. But soon the space got lower and narrower. We had to squeeze between jagged rocks, occasionally scrambling over small boulders. Finally, we came to a large cavern filled with bones. Now, I'm no archaeologist, but these were definitely animal bones. I could tell by the size and shape of them, the tiny little teeth scattered around. At least hundreds of years old. We made a mental note to tell park rangers about this discovery and pressed on. The rest of the cave was pretty uneventful. The walls got darker, the air thicker. But after about 3 hours, we found ourselves in a chamber illuminated by a shaft of sunlight piercing through a hole in the ceiling. We sat down to take a break, enjoying the rare light. That's when we noticed something odd. The floor was covered in strange markings, what looked like handprints. Only they weren't human hands. They were too big, too clawed. Immediately, we started freaking out, unsure of what to do. Should we stay put, leave a message for the outside world, or run? Before we could decide, we heard a loud growl echoing through the cave. Whatever made the noise was big and angry. Panicked, we quickly made our way back through the cave, desperate to find the exit. The growling continued behind us. We picked up our pace. The closer we got to the entrance, the more frantic we became. Soon enough, we were crawling through a tight passage, and as we squeezed through, I could feel my headlamp hitting something on the other side. The moment I touched it, I knew we had to get out of there. The things in the cave at first, my brain refused to process what I was looking at. A pale, hairless shape crawling along the rocks. Thin, almost skeletal. Its limbs bent wrong, too long, no eyes. Just a gaping mouth, lined with teeth that stretched back far beyond what should be possible, almost to where its neck should have been. It sniffed the air, head twitching. Then another appeared, and another. Jake grabbed my arm, whispering, "We have to go." The creatures moved like starved dogs, except faster too fast. Their skin was stretched thin, veins bulging beneath the surface, and the sound the wet growl we'd heard was coming from them, vibrating deep in their throats. We bolted. Every crawl space felt smaller than before, every scrape of stone louder. Behind us, claws scraped rock. The growls grew louder. "Come on!" Jake suited, shoving me forward. I crawled until my palms bled, following the faint chalk marks back toward the entrance. But the tunnels twisted, shifted. I swore some weren't the same as before. Panic clouded everything. 5. The escape attempt, we burst into the boneyard chamber, gasping. I swung my flashlight behind us, just in time to see one of the creatures squeeze through the tunnel, its jaws unhinging wider than I thought possible. I hurled a rock at it, buying us seconds. "Go!" Jake shouted. We ran. The air grew colder, damper, as if the cave itself was alive. My chest ached, my lungs burning, but the faint light of the entrance was finally ahead. And then Jake slipped. He hit the stone hard, his flashlight skittering into the dark. One of the things lunged from the shadows, jaws snapping inches from his leg. I grabbed him, hauling him up with everything I had. We stumbled together, half running, half dragging each other until we burst into daylight. And then, see, the creatures stopped at the threshold, twitching as if the sun itself burned them, their eyeless heads tilted, and then, slowly, they retreated into the dark. 6. The aftermath, we collapsed outside, gasping for air. Hearts racing. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Eventually, I pulled out the emergency phone and called for rescue. But when the team arrived just 30 minutes later, the cave was gone. The entrance, the chamber, the tunnels, all of it, just solid rock. As if it had never existed, we showed them the spot, even pointed to the chalk dust, still smeared faintly on the stone. But there was nothing. Sir Ched found nothing, and Jake, and I. We were left with nothing but the memory. 7. The truth, I can't forget. It's been months since that day. I've gone back, searched the cliffs over and over. But the cave is gone. Sometimes, late at night, I hear it again, that low, wet growl. Sometimes Jake does too. We don't talk about it much, but when we do, both agree on one thing. That cave was never supposed to be found. Those things. They weren't animals. Not exactly. They were adapted for darkness. No eyes. Overextended jaws for pulling flesh from rock crevices. Skin that didn't need sun, and they were waiting. I think about the bones in the limestone, about the insects crawling over them, about how the tunnels seemed to shift when we tried to leave. It wasn't just a cave. It was something else, something alive, and it led us out. For now. 8. Final words. If you ever go hiking and stumble across a cave you've never seen before, don't go inside. Because some places weren't meant to be explored. Some places hide things that should never see the light. And if the growl follows you out, like it still follows me, you'll know exactly what I mean.